The African National Congress will govern South Africa for another 5 years. But this sixth victory of the democratic era, since 1994, was hard-won. For the first time, in a national election, its share of the vote dropped beneath 60%. This suggests both a normalization of South Africa's electoral landscape and an increasingly competitive multi-party democracy. On arrival at the National Results Centre in Pretoria, on Thursday the 9th of May 2019, with around 60% of the votes counted, the party's chairman, Gwede Mantashe, expressed his anxiety to me about the outcome. "We need 60%, he said. I responded by saying that the evidence suggested the ANC was heading for 57% or 58%, and that this represented an upturn of their fortunes after the dramatic dip to 54% in the 2016 local government election. It was, I said, therefore a very good result. He appeared to accept my logic. Mantashe is a supporter of President Cyril Ramaphosa and is currently the Minister of Mineral Resources. The pivotal issue for election 2019 was whether the outcome would give Ramaphosa more political space within the ANC to drive his reform program forward. Since he ousted Jacob Zuma from power in February 2018, having won a very tight race to succeed Zuma as leader of the ANC at its 5-yearly national elective conference the previous December, Ramaphosa has begun to execute a complicated turnaround strategy. But the job is half done. So far, he has appointed several commissions of inquiry to expose the rot of what he called 9 lost years. This paved the way for the appointment of competent, honest men and women to lead key state institutions such as the South African Revenue Service and the National Prosecuting Authority that had succumbed to the Zuma-enabled project of state capture. Yet the Zuma faction within the ANC has not been vanquished, and so Ramaphosa has had to drive with at least one eye on the rearview mirror. His own party has been a drag factor. Would election 2019 deliver a sufficiently big victory for Ramaphosa to shake them off? Some have argued that, were the ANC to win 60% or more in this election, it would have given the party a blank check for further larceny. But a below-par score beneath 56% would have weakened Ramaphosa and provided ammunition for his opponents within the party to attack him and undermine reform plans. These include the much-needed unbundling of the state-owned power utility, Eskom, which represents a major risk factor for South Africa's sluggish economy and its beleaguered public fiscus. A 57% or 58% outcome for the ANC could arguably represent an ideal outcome for the country. The people would have reprimanded the party for its reprehensible conduct over the last decade and, as many of its leaders were conceding yesterday, its failures to deliver good public services. At the same time, it would give Ramaphosa the opportunity to claim a victory and, thereby, the fresh mandate he needs. This indeed appears to have been the outcome. More popular than his party, for the first time since Nelson Mandela in 1994, and more trusted than the leaders of the opposition, Ramaphosa can claim to have saved the ANC's bacon. Election 2019 was also a referendum on South Africa's appetite for the sort of populist politics that has prospered around the world in recent years. The local version is Julius Malema and his militant economic freedom fighters. The exponential growth that the party promised on its campaign trail has proved elusive. The 6 million young people, 18 to 29, who chose not to register to vote, certainly represent a potential untapped market for Malema to build on the 1.5 million, or so, who voted for the EFF this week. But for the time being, South Africa has rejected a populist alternative in favour of more of the devil it knows. The biggest opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, had a very poor election. It lost votes from its right flank to the Freedom Front Plus, an Afrikaans party, and failed to gain them from the middle ground. As a result, overall it has stagnated. Its share of the vote overall may even drop, despite the fact that the conditions for challenging the ANC were so conducive. Questions will inevitably be asked of the DA's leader, Mmusi Maimane. Was he tough enough to cope with the existential ambivalence, which undermined its ability to define a clear value proposition to the electorate? The DA had hoped to add to its progress in the local elections in 2016, when with the help of the EFF, it drove the ANC out of City Hall government in Pretoria and Johannesburg. Both fall within the Gauteng province, South Africa's economic hub. In the national poll, the DA appears to have failed to prove its case in the region, where the ANC looks set to hang on to its majority, albeit by its fingernails. The ANC's domination has been in decline since 2009. In 4 successive national and local government elections, since Jacob Zuma entered office that year, the ANC's share of the vote has fallen. The party's leaders know it, but find it hard to accept. As Mantashe moved on from my conversation, he turned back for a second. But we would still like 60%, it's an ego thing. The ANC's ego may not have been stroked by South Africa's electorate on this occasion. On the contrary, it has fired a shot across the bows of Nelson Mandela's party. A quarter century after Mandela became South Africa's first black, democratically elected president, the ANC's hold on power has weakened. Now it must continue to cleanse the body politic of the contamination of the Zuma years. Ramaphosa will need to use the victory to turn the reform platform he has built over the past year into a springboard for economic growth and job creation. Both are urgently needed. Otherwise, the lesson of election 2019 is clear. Next time the electorate will say, enough is enough, and turn away from the ANC. Now, the report you just listened to was extracted from an article by Richard Calland, an associate professor in public law at the University of Cape Town. Coming up next is a report on ANC Secretary-General AC Magashule's objection to the role of President Cyril Ramaphosa in securing the electoral victory for ANC. ANC Secretary-General AC Magashule has rubbished comments that the party was rescued by President Cyril Ramaphosa in the 2019 national and provincial elections. Magashule, speaking during a press conference at the IEC National Results Operations Centre in Pretoria, said party supporters voted for the party, not an individual. Asked about comments made by ANC head of elections, Fikile Mbalula, that the party may have lost the elections had Ramaphosa not emerged as party president at the 2017 House Rec Conference, Magashule said, "That's nonsense. People are electing the ANC. It's not about any individual. How do you predict? Is Comrade Mbalula saying I was not going to be part of the campaign if the leader was somebody else?" he asked. Magashule said that the ANC would have still received the same results, which at the time of his press briefing saw the ANC sitting at 57%, with about 90% of all voting districts declared. The ANC would be where it is today. People have voted the ANC. People are not voting any person. Mbalula said on Thursday, the 9th of May 2019, that if President Cyril Ramaphosa did not win at the party's 2017 House Rec Conference, the ANC would have sunk to 40% in these elections. Meanwhile, Magashule blamed the bad weather conditions in the Free State for the low turnout of voters. He alluded that the reason for the decline in the Free State, where he was at the helm of the party for 22 years, was the bad weather conditions, which continued well over midnight. "Have you seen what the weather has done in the Free State?" asked Magashule. We are not the IEC, we could not have extended the voting hours. Even if we could extend the hours in parts of the Free State, it rained until well after midnight, said Magashule. Please check in the description box below for the links to the sources of this report. Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe.